How's it going, everybody? So in this video I just wanted to discuss public health and some of the challenges that we face as health professionals or even fitness professionals. Anybody who deals with trying to get the average population to adhere to health practices, trying to get the average population healthier, okay? So from what I can tell in the larger health community, people who follow these videos, natural health community, nutrition science, and whatnot, everybody seems to believe the solution to all of our health problems is to just reinforce whatever nutrition or health paradigm we subscribe to. So for example, the low-carb people, they say, look man, if we just put a ban on sodas and pasta and whatnot, or we tax it, then our whole society will be healthier. And then of course the vegan people are like, you know what, if we just completely wipe meat eaters off the face of the planet, or we put a heavy meat tax, then all of our cardiovascular disease wouldn't exist anymore. And I'll tell you, first of all, even if that was possible and people wouldn't riot and freak out if we did something like that, I think that there's still a lot more complex contributors to these diseases that both parties are not really accounting for. I definitely don't think removing red meat from the food supply would really help health outcomes. And I mean, removing carbohydrates from the food supply could indirectly contribute to positive change. But I think we're, on both sides of the equation, we're missing the larger picture. And what's more important in public health, okay? So there's a difference between specialized nutrition science, like what everyone watching this video right now probably tunes into a lot. I mean, there's a difference between people who will watch hours and hours of podcasts on nutrition science and how to optimize their health, or people that are actually seeking out how to reverse diseases and looking for the root causes of diseases. There's a huge difference between that group of people and then, that 75 to 80% of average Americans who are obese. So actually, yeah, that's actually a real statistic. I think it was 85% of Americans are clinically obese, something like that. So that's a lot. So 85% of all Americans are obese. It might have been some other statistic, but whatever. But just think about that for a second. So we're really thinking that if we change the food pyramid, right? If we change government authority recommendations on meat intake, on carb intake, on pasta intake, we think that the 85% of Americans who are obese are really going to give a damn, and we're going to be able to save them somehow. The fact is, public health is a lot more complicated than that. There's a reason why a lot of medical doctors and health professionals can't just recommend eating, keto or carnivore or paleo or vegan or plant-based, or even recommend restricting calories. There's a reason why that doesn't work, over 85% of the time. Now, I'm not saying that that's an excuse as to why doctors push pharmaceutical drugs and don't even mention nutrition, which, by the way, and I'm going to talk a little bit more deeply on this in a bit, that a lot of doctors actually do recommend nutrition. But the problem is that patients don't care. Or even if they do care, it's a lot hard. For some reason, I don't understand this because I don't find this a challenge, but patients have a hard time, even if they're told, look, if you don't change your nutrition, it's likely you're going to lose a limb due to diabetes, or you're going to die or something. People won't do that, even if they have a death sentence. So what we have to understand is it's not as simple as putting policies in place to tell people how to eat healthy. The problem is not the recommendations, okay? And look, this is gonna rustle some jimmies, but the fact is, the people are not unhealthy because of anything the food pyramid or the World Health Organization or USADA put in place. Like the food pyramid recommends, as far as I can tell, controlling calories within a certain degree, something like 2,500 calories a day for a man and like 2,000 for a female or something, right? And obviously, the overall calorie that you as an individual need to follow is going to be highly individual based on your body weight, your activity level, and everything else. And it is true that metabolic rate varies from individual to individual, but this fact still remains that calories are number one and most important as far as, what it comes down to as far as body fat. Not to say that, a calorie is a calorie. Now that's not good in practice, but what I'm getting at is if everyone just followed the food pyramid within the context of caloric control, especially now, because before they didn't really specify between whole grains and refined grains. They just recommended like 11 servings of like grains a day. But if everybody followed the food pyramid recommendations and they actually stuck to a whole foods diet and the grain intake that they had, and I mean that's a crazy amount. It's something like 11 servings, but keep in mind, a serving of grains is something like 3/4 of a cup, like 1/4 of a cup of dry grain or something. So it's not as crazy as you might think. But if they were eating whole grains, like wheat pasta instead of white pasta, and just removing bread, because obviously we know most whole grain bread is not actually whole grain. And of course, you all know I don't recommend eating grains at all. But if we did base our diet on whole foods, whole grains, even with the high carb amount that they recommend, and they include adequate protein, which the food pyramid doesn't really legitimately, if we're being honest, the amount of protein on the food pyramid is not adequate. It's like hovering a little bit over the minimum recommended amount, but still, we would probably see at the very least a lot lower rates of diabetes, heart disease, and obesity than we currently see. I'm telling you guys right now, the reason why 85% of Americans are obese and they have type 2 diabetes and some form of metabolic syndrome, whether it's high blood pressure, diabetes, having excess body fat, cardiovascular disease, and all of those are really symptoms of diabetes in my opinion. Or insulin resistance. The incidence of these diseases and obesity would be a lot less if people were following food pyramid recommendations. Now, obviously, the food pyramid is not ideal, it's not optimal, but it's better than what people follow. People are not sick because they follow the food pyramid. People are sick because they don't give a fuck. That's the reason why. So, this is very important to understand when we are in this health sphere and we're, especially we're following carnivore dogma or low carb dogma or vegan dogma. And also, if you have family members who you want to eat healthy, anyone who's ever tried to have their family, care about health information, my mom at first was just completely against, she would get angry whenever I would talk to her about it. But of course at the time, I was a bit militant, I think, about it. I'm like, oh, you gotta understand, you can extend your life by 20 years or whatever. At the time, I was a raw vegan. You gotta awaken your kundalini. But you'll realize it's very, very hard to get people to change. So this is important also because a lot of my subscribers, I've seen comments from people saying, doctors are evil, they're bought out by big pharma, and people will even say that they're like the Antichrist and like the devil is controlling doctors and all this crap. That's not true. The fact of the matter is, first of all, I have a lot of friends that are doctors. Most of them are on some form of alternative or functional medicine, but a good chunk of them, probably like 45% of my friends that are actually in the medical field, they're conventional medicine doctors or they're nurses. They all get into, the reason why doctors go, look, you do not go through, 8 to 12 years of medical school or of college in general to get a medical degree or to get a degree in some form of public health. If you don't care about people and you don't care about what you do, most doctors and nutritionists and dietitians and things, they get into this profession to help people. That doesn't mean that their methods are perfect, okay? You've got to understand, just because a doctor might not be educated on nutrition, just because a doctor might say that your nutrition paradigm is quackery, okay, and I know that shit hurts, it is frustrating, but they are not saying they're not against this nutritional healing, they're not against alternative medicine because they're evil, okay? In fact, a lot of doctors actually do make recommendations for even remedies like in herbs and things. Some of them actually have pharmaceutical grade supplements they recommend. And they make nutritional recommendations and they prescribe exercise. I know doctors who write diet and exercise programs for their patients. But even those doctors that do, okay, I have firsthand experience seeing it for myself with family members and my own clients, you all. I've been a trainer for like almost 10 years now, and a health consultant where people pay me to give them advice on, guidance for how that they can heal their diseases. People who are looking to reverse diseases and things a lot of times have trouble adhering to advice that they're paying for, okay? So imagine the average person going to a doctor trying to they're dealing with diabetes or whatever, and their diet says, hey, go out of your way with your busy lifestyle to exercise 3 to 5 times a day, even if it's 30 minutes, and then completely change your diet and nutrition style. No matter how easy you make it for people, you could tell them, look, just do a total of 50 burpees every single day. It doesn't matter if you do 1 burpee at a time, as long as you get 50 total burpees a day. It can be that easy. But just doing a new habit for some reason is so freaking hard for people to do, okay? This, to me, was groundbreaking, even though, I should have known it a long time ago. And I think a lot of people who are saying all this crap, like doctors are evil and blah, 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 it's because they're not clinicians. They don't work with people. They're like spending hours every single day, like, oh yeah, like Alex Jones or whatever it is. Sorry if I'm sounding condescending and I'm taking it out of context and exaggerating it. But the reality is people don't understand how hard it is to get the average person, or even people who care about their health, to change their habits, okay? Doctors are not evil. And even policymakers are not necessarily evil. The fact is, public health is not as easy as telling people what to do, okay? You can have the most perfect nutrition and diet and exercise recommendations. You can have something that is so grounded in science and proven by science that can heal people's problems 100%. And it won't matter if people can't follow it. Period. That is the entire point of this video. And that is what public health is all about. It's like making recommendations that are scalable and sustainable enough and easy enough for the vast majority of the population to implement in their life, that is also effective enough to make a statistical difference. And remember, statistical difference is not the same as clinical difference, okay? It kind of sucks, because that means a lot of the things that are being recommended, like these pharmaceutical drugs, studies will say, you have like a 30% decrease, in relative risk of a disease with a drug. Relative risk, 30% relative risk is not that much. The absolute clinical difference that the drug might make in that regard is like, instead of 5 out of 10 patients dying from the disease, now maybe 4 out of 10 patients die of that disease. That's a 1 person difference out of 10, but it's a difference nonetheless. So the magnitude of effect of these dietary recommendations or these drug recommendations are not that huge. It's not like, so like those people who are saying like, we should ban carbs or whatever, like, though, yeah, if we put that into place and we enforced it and people would follow it somehow, it would probably make a huge difference. Like, if we just removed any food group, really, that is calorically dense, because it'll have much more of effect than, the recommendations we have in place. But the problem is that, obviously, if we remove red meat from the food supply, which everyone who follows me knows I'm totally against. Like, that would actually probably be a net negative. The average person needs more protein, not less protein. And that's a huge problem with the food pyramid, by the way. But people would riot on the street if we told people that. If we told people to remove red meat. If we did the, remove carbs, if we removed fucking bread from the food shelves, people would riot on the street. The same way that, I've heard in history when they tried to ban alcohol, they actually put alcohol ban or something and people rioted and it went into chaos. So you guys have to understand that. So with all of this being said, it is a fact that there is government corruption. Pharmaceutical companies do play a huge role in influencing public health recommendations. I don't want to go too deep into all of this, but it is true that there is a huge, I believe pharmaceutical industry funds a pretty significant portion of the curriculum given to a lot of health professionals and even fitness professionals, mostly indirectly, okay? So don't quote me on this. It's also a fact that, doctors are given kickbacks, and what we mean by kickbacks, that's nebulous and ambiguous, but there are perks that are given, and there are funding and things, especially if you go to large conferences and things, when you get people more on these drugs and things, at least according to my friends that are doctors, who actually realize that at the same time, most patients aren't going to change their diet. So it's like, either way, putting someone on metformin is going to save their life. Imagine a doctor who's like, oh, no, sorry, drugs are bad for you kids. I'm not going to put you I'm not going to give you insulin. I'm not going to prescribe you metformin. I'm not going to prescribe statin drugs. No, you go on this diet that has shown been shown in intervention trials to positively influence metrics of your disease. Go on this diet, but I'm not going to give you drugs. Drugs are bad. Okay. So it's true that there's pretty big consequences with statin drugs, and even things like metformin. It inhibits gluconeogenesis and some of these things, which is part of its beneficial action. And insulin can be problematic. But could you imagine, people don't understand, yeah, all these drugs are bad, there's side effects and blah, blah, blah. If you just change your diet, you'll be better off. A doctor can't do that. First of all, that's negligence, okay, on their part. Second of all, even if a patient does choose to attempt to change their diet, they're not going to be perfect 100% of the time. So it's important for patients and clients to be on their pharmaceutical medications while they're trying to make these lifestyle changes, because the pharmaceutical drugs are at least going to help make a small difference in improving health outcomes, especially when they slip up on their diet. A diabetic patient, if they're not prescribed insulin, could you imagine they're on a low-carb diet and they, for whatever reason, they slip up, they're at a family gathering or something and they happen to have some pie. And now they have this uncontrolled hyperglycemic response because they went off their diet, because habits are very hard to adhere to, and their doctor didn't give them insulin, and now they're in a diabetic coma or whatever, and they have to call the ambulance. Let's be real. This is the facts, okay? This is from somebody who used to kind of like believe like, oh yeah, fuck pharmaceutical drugs, they're taking over the world and blah, blah, blah. Like, it would be nice if we had more nutritional education and we funded more science on healing with disease, and if vegans and so-called evidence-based gurus who rely on just such weak fucking evidence, it's fucking with my head. It's so crazy. You know, like polyphenols are magical. We have intervention trials that don't really show that high of a magnitude of effect. Like, it's like a 3% relative risk difference. Oh, it's statistically significant. Anyway, yeah, fiber is so important. Oh my god. Oh my god. But the point is, what are they supposed to do? Not use evidence? Not use science? You know? Let people die? Because they give recommendations that are based in what? Like, Dr. Seeby's electrical alkaline vegan protocol? Fuck no. Please. Evidence and science is very important, even if the magnitude of effect's not that high. And pharmaceutical medications are important. They all play a role. Now, understand again, so like I was saying, like pharmaceutical corporations play a role in all this. They do kind of like, they fund science that helps make their drugs sound more credible or more useful. Drugs that kind of pin LDL cholesterol as a causal role. If you look, so far the only real evidence that seems like it might show causation between LDL cholesterol, saturated fat, and heart disease is funded by pharmaceutical drugs, and it's like one giant statin drug advertisement. You know, there was a review article from 2004 that showed a dose-dependent increase in LDL cholesterol over time. Seems to increase heart disease risk in a dose-dependent manner. And it was all studies on, it was intervention trials with statin drugs, showing that statin drugs can save lives. And it's like, well, it's a lowered LDL. You see, chimpanzees and primates have low LDL levels, so humans should too. And then, of course, there's a 2018 and a 2020 consensus statement by like the European Nutritional Coalition or something. Vegans always point to this, and some evidence-based nutrition professionals do too, where they show, again, it's like genetic conditions of cholesterol correlating with heart disease, and pharmaceutical statin drug trials and things correlating with heart disease risk. And it's like, well, there's no real, like, we've never seen a diet-related causal link to heart disease. It's a lot of correlation and stretching, kind of like stretching the goalposts, stretching the findings and things. So anyway, all I'm trying to say is that there is a lot of manipulation in the scientific evidence, a lot of funding by the food industry. It's pretty clear that Gatorade is funded, like these carbohydrate studies that kind of like reinforces the idea that if athletes don't refill glycogen, they're gonna like die of like glycogen deficiency. It's complete nonsense. You actually don't need any exogenous carbs after exercise to refill glycogen. It will refill either way after about 24 hours. And the longer you've been deprived of glucose uptake, the more efficient that process becomes. But the point is, Gatorade, some of these, Monsanto and some of these grain, industry, Bayer, they definitely have their fingers in government policy. They definitely have an influence on doctors' recommendations, funding science that pushes their products. Obviously, the animal agriculture industry does too. Okay, Dannon yogurt and their probiotic studies. It's like, it's true. There's, conspiracies at play, but in reality, when we're talking about real people and real health outcomes, there's very, very little that governments can do to really help population's health. There would have to be a huge, complete dissemblance of, it's the people's paradigms. They don't see food as medicine, food as fuel. They don't really value their health. They're not critical thinkers. They don't give a fuck. People are indifferent. They're pushing materialism rather than intrinsic motivations. So it's really more of like a social paradigm, a social mental construct. It's a value system at play. People care more about pleasure rather than what things mean to them, what their food means to them. People would rather go to Walmart and get supplements than order it from a small family farm in the freaking Himalayan desert or something. People don't care. They're like, if it's cheap and it's pleasureful and whatever, then it's good. They're like, I want to eat pasta and I want to drink soda and blah, blah, blah. And still, not have diabetes and die. So yeah, there's a very small amount of people who actually give a fuck about their health. So government policy and these large recommendations we make to people, it is to account for the vast majority of the people. The recommended daily allowance of vitamins and minerals is the same way. I mean, could you imagine, no one gets the recommended daily of vitamins and minerals. No one gets the recommended amount of fruits and vegetables per day. Not that I'm saying that they need to do any of that. Definitely no one gets the recommended, the optimal amount of protein. No one cares. So, it's not that these government policies are necessary or optimal, but what are they gonna fucking do? No one fucking cares anyway. Literally no one follows the government recommended shit unless they have a trainer, they have a medical doctor, and they themselves care. It's very rare that people that hire trainers or hire doctors even follow their advice. And then a lot of people will follow health protocols and care about their health for a while and then they'll just fall off. So I don't know what the takeaway from this video is other than understanding it's not doctors are not evil. That's the main thing I want to get across. Doctors aren't evil. Okay? I'm telling you, no one gives a fuck. It sucks. It's hot. It's very hard to get people to fucking eat healthy and do healthy shit. You could have the most perfect protocol, but if no one follows it, it doesn't matter. That's why people keep talking about how adherence is number one. If you can get people to eat fucking Pop-Tarts, Lane Norton, if it fits their macro shit, even though Lane Norton doesn't tell people to eat Pop-Tarts. But if you can get people to eat Pop-Tarts and stuff and keep the calories controlled and eat enough protein and exercise, if they're eating Pop-Tarts and shit, oh well. At least they're doing better than before. Obviously, sugar, carbohydrate, refined carbs and things have, in my opinion, well-documented negative effects from case studies, case reports, even randomized controlled trials on glycemic control, whether people want to admit it or not. Also, or not randomized controlled trials, but intervention trials. And then, of course, studies like Weston Price on indigenous populations, what happens when you simply add refined foods into the diet. But think what you will, if people eat Pop-Tarts and they calorically restrict and they exercise, they're going to be way better off, and these motherfuckers just don't care. So every step in the direction of being healthier is important. Okay? So, yeah, I'm pretty freaking buzzed on coffee right now. I don't know if anything I said made sense. let me know in the comments, because I oftentimes just feel like I'm just talking and talking, not getting to the point when I'm on coffee. Damn it. But I'll say one more thing, that this is also why you see red meat associated with cancer risk and shit, and these large population studies and cohort studies even. And then we see the more fruits and vegetables people eat, the better their health outcomes. It's probably not because of fiber and polyphenols. It's probably because the only people who eat that much fruit and vegetables in these cohort studies are people who also exercise and avoid refined foods and things. But even then, they still will eat these refined foods. So the magnitude of effect might not be that high. I honestly do believe the best thing we can do for our health is remove all refined foods, trans fats, and cook things from, like, you know, indigenous sources. That's why I really think that's what it comes down to. I think that's why the blue zones live as long as they do. I don't think it's magical polyphenols. I mean, I do think, polyphenols do play a role, but only very specific ones. Okay? Like, you know, and like goji berry, like, there's some tonic herbs and things, probably blueberries are probably one of them, things like that, anthocyanins. I don't think if you're eating like pounds of fucking broccoli a day that's going to be the thing that makes you live to 100. I think there's specific, like, I do think green tea and some of these polyphenols and tea. So anyway, that's all I'm going to say. Do the things that matter the most, right? Like, if you really think you're going to be eating all these, like, refined foods on a daily basis, and you're going to switch out red meat for freaking chicken, I hear this all the time, you know, and you're drinking alcohol, even if it's like 1 glass of alcohol a day, if you're overweight, you know, you don't really exercise very vigorously, you're barking up the wrong tree. But from a greater perspective, the whole focusing on red meat and shit, that's the problem. Focus on saturated fat, If people ate more meat and saturated fat, I guarantee you they would have less appetite for some of these other things. But the main source of calories in the diet, main source of saturated fat, is actually from pizza, from macaroni and cheese. It's from cheese. So, I don't know. Anyway, that's where these LDL studies on large populations don't make sense. But you won't get these evidence-based theories to admit that. So anyway, leave your question, comments down below. I'll talk to you all next time.